Mr. Tong Wei, and Mr. Teng Chan Leong. Professor Dr. Ong Kian Ming went to Duke University, the University of Cambridge, with a Master of Philosophy in Economics and also a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the London School of Economics, and then decided to skip across the pond to Duke, where you did your PhD in Political Science. Mr. Tong Wei graduated with BSc in Electrical Engineering from South Dakota State University, and then he did his MBA from the University of South Australia. He also skipped across an even broader pond. Mr. Teng Leong, sorry. Teng Chan Leong went to Carnegie Mellon University. I think that's in Pittsburgh, right? Because my brother went to University of Pittsburgh, I think just across the street here. Without further ado, I would first invite Dr. Ong Kian Ming to share a little bit about how he came about to skip across the pond, namely to have completed his bachelor's and master's in the United Kingdom, and then decided to do his PhD in Duke. Oh, sorry.
Thanks so much, Dr. Yusun, for moderating today's session together with my fellow panelists. Thanks everyone for coming on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Also to the AUAM, thank you very much for hosting today's event. So, I've not really shared my US education experience openly before, even when I was a member of parliament. But since all of you here are US grads, I thought good to show a little bit of variety in terms of the process, especially going from the UK system to the US system. And when I finished my master's in economics, MPhil in economics in the UK, I worked for a couple of years for the Boston Consulting Group. And it was always my ambition or desire to want to understand and experience the US education system. When I was doing economics at LSE, my dream was to do a PhD in economics in the University of Chicago, where we have Professor Kun here. He did his PhD there, and then Victor also studied his undergraduate in economics in Chicago, because at the time we heard a lot about the Chicago School. Many Nobel Prize winners, including Milton Friedman and others who came along the way, were also from Chicago. But I realized that at that time, and even now, probably more so now, if you want to do a PhD in economics, it's basically a math degree, right? You're doing a lot of stats and a lot of math, and I didn't really want to do that, and I thought that it would be a good balance to do economics until master's, and then also to supplement it with a PhD in political science, something that was a little bit more balanced, a little bit more holistic, if you will. And I began the journey of applying for a Fulbright scholarship. I'm glad Curtis is here. The Fulbright scholarship is under MEC, I heard about this Fulbright scholarship when I was studying in Singapore, when I was doing my O-levels and A-levels there. When I saw a number of writings by a couple of Fulbright scholars. And in fact, one of them is somebody I got to know later on. His name is Simon Tay, a lawyer, runs an institution in Singapore called the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. And he writes very well, and he was how I was introduced to the Fulbright program. So I started applying after I left BCG, and I was doing a couple of gigs at a number of research institutions. And the process, as you guys know, is very onerous for all of you who apply into the US system, undergraduate. In PhD, at a PhD level, it's even worse in the sense that you have to look for professors who are willing to work with you and who are willing to vouch for you for the PhD process. And I think this is something that many Malaysians who aspire to do their PhDs in the US don't really quite understand. I think Curtis will know this better than others, in the sense that if you're not from the US system, it's very hard for you to get into the US system at the PhD level. If you want to do an MBA, you're willing to pay for it, somebody's willing to sponsor you, that's not an issue. right? At the PhD level, it's much more onerous, it's much more challenging. One of the reasons is because when you get into a PhD program in the US, it is for a long period of time, and there's a commitment on the part of the university to fund you as much as possible, right? So I was very fortunate. I applied for the Fulbright. I applied to different universities and got into Duke because there was a professor there who was a professor of law and comparative politics that had come to Malaysia during the 1960s to study ethnic politics in Malaysia. His name is Professor Don Horowitz, whom I'm still keeping in touch with, and he was willing to work with me. And not only did I get the Fulbright scholarship, but because of the US PhD education system, especially for well-financed schools like Duke, with good endowments, I also managed to get an arrangement with Duke where I would get an allowance and also be a teaching assistant as well. Right, so that was very helpful to me, and the Fulbright program was also helpful to me for another reason, which is I just got married in 2004. My wife followed me to Durham, North Carolina, and she, because I was on a J1 scholarship, J1 visa, not an F1 visa, she was allowed to work, and she was an architect, and she got into the medical architecture space, and we had a wonderful time for 6 years. So the academic process is actually very rigorous. I think those of you who have not gone through a PhD process, I'll just share one story which would shape my understanding of the US PhD process for the entire 6 years and beyond. So in my second week of my PhD experience there, I attended a workshop, and the workshop was given by a Chad professor from Harvard. And he came, he presented his working paper, and then the first year PhD student with me stood up after that and said, "Oh, Professor, fantastic work. I think you've brought up many interesting points, but here are 3 areas where you can improve your presentation and your paper." This is a first year PhD student telling a Chad Harvard professor on how to improve his work. And I think that is something that's very common in the US ecosystem, whereby there's a free flow of ideas, people expect you to speak up, Chad professors would expect graduate students to have that kind of dialogue and back and forth. And that is, I think, what is really unique and special about the PhD process. Maybe just one last thing, I love to explore the United States. When I was there with my wife, we went to a lot of national parks, from the Everglades in Florida up to the Moab Arches National Park in Moab, Utah, all the way to Yellowstone in Montana, as well as Wyoming. So the US has very fond memories of that place. It's a bit far to get to now, but if I go back there again, I'll definitely visit more national parks and also some of the interesting cities in the US. So maybe that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
When I first arrived in South Dakota, I basically said, I'm going to transfer out next semester. But eventually I stayed for 4 years. One of the best things about South Dakota is there's literally 0 crime rate. Nearly 0. I never locked my car. I left my key in my car. I never locked my door for the last 4 years. For the whole 4 years, and it was totally peaceful. Okay. Okay, that's my South Dakota. But when I went to US, I studied electrical engineering. My aim again, Silicon Valley, right? So I wanted to do digital electronics. So there was 3 subjects that I didn't like the most. First one is semiconductor. Number 2 is high power electrical, because I want to deal with 5 volts. Anything more than 5 volts is dangerous to me. And the worst is thermodynamics. I almost failed thermodynamics because I want to be a digital electronics engineer. What is thermodynamics to me, right? Nothing to do with it. But guess what? Just like what J.K. Rowling says, right? The thing that you fear the most has a strange way to finding the way back to you. My first job was in Texas Instruments, semiconductor. Then my second job was dealing with high power electrical. And now my whole life is in thermodynamics. When I go back to university, give lectures, I lecture on thermodynamics. Okay. So I don't know if I really qualify to talk about my US educational experience because I've been doing things that I didn't like when I studied. But I guess whatever you study is not that, it's not about what you study, it's about the whole experience, I think. For me, you know, statistics, 46% of graduates didn't do what they studied. I'm an industrial advisor for Monash Engineering Department, and we know at certain years, 30% of Monash engineering graduates went to become banker. So basically, I think it's the overall experience. Maybe I'll share later.
Well, you certainly have a very American experience. The American education experience, indeed, it's a very enriching one. For me, I was actually accepted for astrophysics, but I think after two semesters, it immediately dawned upon me, gradually dawned upon me, I'm no physics material. So I switched to, at least to me at that time, the next best thing, namely as aeronautical engineering. And again, just like your experience, things had a very strange way of coming back to you. I have not been doing anything engineering for the last, let's say, 25 years until the year 2019, when the Sabah state government at the time, they set up an aircraft maintenance company, and lo and behold, they appointed me as the chairman of this company. So, going into all these fluid mechanics and thermodynamics, it all came back. So anyway, so we have our third panelist, Mr. Teng Chan Leong. Mr. Teng Chan Leong. Please share with us why you went to Carnegie Mellon.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Ong. I think looking at the panelists here, I'm definitely way underqualified to be on the panel. But as usual, I'm very happy to share. So just to clarify, maybe I'll start off with a quiz, right? Let's guess my last name, right? Is Leong Teng Chan? Is it Mr. Leong? Is it Mr. Teng? Or is it Mr. Chan? Let's see whether we get an equal split. Who thinks it's Leong as my surname? 0 or 1, 2, alright. Who thinks it's Chan? Chan's a pretty common surname. 1, 2. Who thinks it's Teng? Alright, it's not too bad. Like majority gets it right. So my surname is Teng. Chan Leong is my given name, and obviously I have very educated parents. In fact, I'm the first generation in my family that actually went to university. Both my parents, didn't even graduate university. The story about how I got to the United States is actually really interesting. So when I grew up, as I know I hope my PR consultant will see this, right? So I am a budak kampung, like it's as kampung as you can get. I grew up in the town of Taiping. Success in life means graduating SPM, get into JPA, and then you're set for life. Become doctor, engineer, lawyer, one of those three options. So that was I know we laugh about it today, right? But growing up, that was literally the Bible, right? You have to score well in SPM because you have to get JPA, otherwise you're failing in life. So back in my SPM days, I think it was like August of my SPM year, one of my senior, he's also a US alum, named Maya Moses, he came to me and said, hey Chan Leong, you know what? JPA is not all there is in here. There are other companies that give out scholarship as well. Sunweb is one of such. I heard the application is open. Can you please, apply? And as the typical Malaysian kid, right? What do? You ignore that advice and then you move on with life. Go and kick a plastic bottle and do what Budak Kampungs do. And one fine day I got bored. I'm a very bored child, right? I got so bored that I'm like, you know what? Actually, maybe I'll go check it out. I logged onto the system. Internet was available when I was in school. Then I saw, it's the last day. It was 7 p.m. and the application is going to close in 5 hours. So what most KL kids would have done is to spend two months working on it, getting mentors to go through the application, asking for advice from the school, getting up something, right? And I got in through that. And that's my first time realizing the disadvantage of being in a typical Malaysian education system versus a privileged education system. First is that in order for the teachers to convince us to do better for the actual SPM, what do? They will suppress your trial result, because the worse you do in your trial, the more work you put in to do better in trial. But what do the privileged school actually do? They give you better results, so you can start using those trial results to apply to get to the schools that you want. So that's my first realization that, oh my god, all this like old school, old-fashioned way is definitely not helping me out. But luckily, I got through, right? Cut forward 2 years, I was part of the Sun Nabi's scholarship program. I'm going through their program, and like what Ong Kian Ming said, the US education system is actually really unfriendly to a typical Malaysian education system. So we had to go through a lot of questions, and Chen Zhao was sitting over there, organized USApps, and through USApps I found so many different help support coaches that guided us through the process, and I was then exposed to ED and early application and early decision and things like that. So as a typical engineer, I just applied to everything. Like, as a typical Malaysian, I applied to everything. Whoever wants me, please, I just get somewhere. But somehow, I went through the Stanford education. I hope it's also not Stanford, Princeton. Princeton wasn't part of that whatever standard. So Princeton actually had their own application system. I read through it, and I hated it. That was the first time that I realized, as a Malaysian kid, that you would hate something that's branded. I'm like, oh my god, I totally could not relate to how Princeton wrote their application. So I didn't apply for it, right? Maybe it's another way of saying I'm not good enough to get there, so I just pretend I didn't want to be there. But when I read through the Carnegie Mellon prospectus, somehow I felt relatable. There was a lot of engineering in the way they talk about things. There's a lot of rigor in the work, and they focus a lot on work and putting your heart and soul into the work. And somehow, as a son of a mechanic, I could really relate to it. Having been someone that used my hands to make an effort, that was sort of what drew me to it. So I said, hey, you know what? I only got one chance. Let's apply to ED in CMU. And I obviously applied to a bunch of other stuff as well. And then the most fearful part happened. I actually got accepted to ED through CMU, but then I also got confirmed to be interviewed for Cornell. And I remembered freaking out, right? Because I had to text Chen Zhao and say, Chen Zhao, I know we have an interview coming out, but I kind of already got ED. I don't know if I should go through this. I don't know if I want to say no, but Cornell is a really good school too. And back then I was still really shy, right? But in the end, I turned it down. And I think that's probably the best testimony about the US application process, because they do really filter you by fit. Because when I do get there, I realize that I'm no longer a misfit. I am among all the misfits that look like me and sound like me and they're exactly like me. Right? We geek out, and suddenly being nerdy wasn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to be celebrated. Right? In fact, I'm not geeky enough. I'm not geeky enough to be part of the geeky community in the school, and I loved it. So that's sort of the long story of how I end up in the United States, and following the footsteps of both the panelists, I obviously also did not end up as an engineer, even though I graduated as a chemical engineer. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, when I applied to university, there was no such thing as internet. Internet came about during, I think, the 3rd year of college, when I had my email address for the first time, and it was something really amazing. You can write your friends over the internet and so on. Now, the next round of questions would be about perhaps how your US education, your US experience, in a sense, shape and guide your career path, your career development, or how did it shape your personality, your worldview? Perhaps, again, we could start with Kian Ming.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like back in my politics day, I have to stand up and give ceramah.
You can sit down, don't...
No, maybe stand up because the people at the back can't see. Yeah. I was in the US, in Durham, North Carolina from 2004 to 2010. 2004 to 2008 was under President George W. Bush, and then starting in around 2006, there was a up-and-coming young senator from the state of Illinois called Barack Obama that gave a very inspiring speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2006, I think. Yeah, and of course that was the start of a very unique moment in the US political experience, where you could see an African American with a genuine shot at not only getting the nomination for the Democratic Party, but with a genuine shot of actually winning the US presidential elections. And that was a time of great optimism. I was a little bit caught up in it as well, seeing how the story and the narrative of Barack Obama was one that was very unique, not just in America, but I think in any community that you would find yourself in. A person of mixed heritage. His father was originally from Kenya. His family on the mother's side were from Hawaii, and that's where he grew up, in a very multicultural kind of setting and a hang loose kind of setting. And he also spent some time in Indonesia, in a sort of like a pesantren kind of setting. So somebody with a very different kind of worldview. And I think, given my own education experience, having studied in Singapore, UK and US, and also living in a multicultural place, I thought that it would be interesting to see how those kinds of experiences in the US, not just the academic but the non-academic, and exposure to the political system in the US could be somehow applied a little bit in Malaysia, especially the good parts, not the bad parts. And there are many parts that are not so positive with regards to the system there. And I think one of the things that I learned a lot from Barack Obama, in terms of the way he led, in terms of the way he reached out, was he always tried to look at things from other people's point of view. He always asked the right questions. He didn't jump to conclusions. He was always somebody who wanted to listen to everyone around the room. And somebody who was quite inclusive in many of the things that he did, and also the way he did many of the things that he did. And when I came back, you guys know the Malaysian system quite well. There were some challenges with regards to the political ecosystem, and I thought that I could bring back some of that experience, in terms of engagement as well as in terms of public policy engagement to the Malaysia ecosystem. And that was when I decided to join full-time politics. So maybe one thing that I think I tried to inculcate and live out in my life as a member of parliament was to be as inclusive and also to be as open as possible to different points of view and to different communities. And that's why I was fortunate enough in 2013 to represent a very multiracial constituency. From 2013 to 2018, I was the MP for Serdang, which was a constituency with about 50% Chinese voters, 40% Malay voters, 10% Indian voters. And after the constituency delimitation exercise in 2018, my constituency changed from Serdang to Bangi, and it became a Malay majority constituency. Went up to about 51% Malay, 39% Chinese, 10% Indians. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I was then the only DAP non-Malay MP who represented a Malay majority constituency. Not because I wanted it, but because Najib drew the constituency the way it became. I engage with communities from all backgrounds and all races, and I think my approach has always been one that's quite consistent. So even now, I think when I go down to the ground, go back to my constituency, people still recognize me and they still come by and say hi, and they may even belanja me some teh tarik, and definitely won't throw water in my face. So that's the good part about the US system, having this kind of much more inclusive approach, which I think in this day and age we need to have much more of, not just in the US but also in Malaysia. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Ong Wei, as you briefly mentioned just now, nowadays you are in this heating, ventilation and air conditioning, right? So how did your electrical engineering background sort of usher you into the HVAC industry? And overall, how did your American experience shape your career?
Thank you. I say I didn't like a few subjects, but I didn't say I totally didn't study them. So today I still, I didn't leave the engineering field. I still an engineer, but just shifted the field a little bit.
Would you help me check to see the training box?
My engineering training gives me two things: fundamental physics and analytical and problem-solving skills. And these two basically never outdated. They are still applicable until today. And because of these two, plus whatever self-study they can learn, and through experience, slowly gone into HVAC. In fact, my main business is not just HVAC. I started the company as a product design consultancy, just because the first customer was in water heating in the UK, and then the second customer was the largest water heating company in Germany. So slowly and naturally stuck in the same division. So today, the deeper I go in, the more you explore. So today I'm also the current president of the American Society of HVAC, or Heating, Ventilation and Air Conditioning Engineers in Malaysia chapter. So how did my US experience shape me? I was from Chinese school. Many of you probably are. Chinese primary school, Chinese secondary school. I learned physics, I learned chemistry, I learned mathematics, everything in Chinese. Okay. Not to be stereotyping, but remember this is back in about 40 years ago. Yeah? Back then, we are trained to be obedient. We are trained to follow the rule. We are trained not to challenge a teacher. And sort of within the box. And being a bit rebellious, I didn't like that. Okay. But back then, critical thinking was not a big thing at my school at least. Yeah. Today is a bit different. I say this is 40 years ago already. Today is quite different. I went back to school, it's quite different. So when I first went to US, my US experience actually liberalized me. It allows me to think outside the box. It allows me to do whatever I like to do, and it's so. I say it is so flexible that the subject I didn't want to take, apart from a few compulsory, I don't have to take. The subjects that I like, I can take more, and that really is one thing. Second thing, when you come into research, basically I choose my own topic, and I choose the area that I really like to do. And the third thing is, I start to see how US technopreneurs build up their company, the thinking, the innovative thinking, dare to dream, dare to challenge the norm. Yeah. That's basically what shapes me today. I didn't stay down for the American dream, because I still love my home country. Apart from the family factor, I still think that Malaysia is a land of opportunity. And of course, even until today, I believe that people like Dr. Ong is going to make our country better. But the spirit of the American dream is what I carry with me when I set up a business here in Malaysia. So my first slogan for my company is challenge the norm. And when we set up the company as an engineering consultancy company, I didn't choose a customer in Malaysia. We chose a customer in the UK. Of course, because they can pay higher price for intellectual property. But it ended up that we are probably one of the few engineering consultancy company from Malaysia that is providing engineering service to UK and Germany. How did we do that? A lot of people say it's not possible, but again, my US experience taught me to be. I probably use a more modest word. Taught me to be daring. My engineers range from UK and Australia and US. In the universities, they are scoring not worse than the local. Why can't we become the consultancy and do projects over in that country? Why do we, when we come back, we have to be a third world country? So that's what our thinking all about. And so today, we have got 19 patents in our small Malaysian company. 70% of hotels, condominium within 10 kilometers of KLCC using our technology, including the other speaker who's supposed to be here. This Merdeka 118, on the 119th floor, we have world's tallest renewable energy systems fitted up there. And this is all because the spirit of the American dream that shapes me today. Thank you.
Well, very nicely presented. I think there were like 10 rounds of applause, right? Indeed, the American academic freedom, it's something which inspires all of us. The ability to choose different subjects, different majors. I branch out into majoring in German literature as well, because as engineering student, you need to take either German or Russian, right? And Russian has this funny Siluric character, so I said I might as well take German. But you know, sometimes you sort of fell in love in the language, and I did a degree in German literature after that. But well, in Carnegie Mellon, chemical engineering must have been like the major, isn't it? Because Carnegie and Mellon, they were like oil tycoons.
We were, but computer science.
So share with us, how did it shape your life? Well, how did you not do what you study and so on? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. O. I feel like we need to switch up the orders. You know, like it's very hard to come after the great stories of these people. But Carnegie Mellon is actually known very well for computer science. The school is sponsored. We have a lot of grants from like NASA and all the defense. So Microsoft has a gate. We literally have a bridge called the Gates Bridge because Microsoft funded it. So what I think I took away from the US education, I wish I had an inspiring story like them to share, right? But I think mine would be a story of failure. So when I first got to the States, bright eye, 11, 12A, one scholar from Malaysia, like, I'm gonna come and show you guys how it's done. And I start, failing a class, right? If you come from a Chinese family, it's like getting a B, right? So I got a B, I'm like, oh my God, I failed. So, and it's so uncomfortable, right? So uncomfortable because I like the subject, but why the subject don't like me back, right? So I couldn't explain it. I got so angry at it, I retook the same subject, and I got the same result. So that's when I'm like, you know what, maybe take a pause on that, right? But I was a very curious kid. So back in the States, even though I did chemical engineering, from the very onset of my education, I'm already quite certain that I'm not going to be a chemical engineer. And because the US education has been such a journey of discovery, it led me to figure out what I actually wanted to do. And I think the biggest reason why I stayed in engineering was because I love problem solving, right? I really love like logically solving problems. So unlike Dr. Oh, who picked up German and Russian, the only additional language I picked up was Python, right? So I picked up programming language instead, and I loved it, right? I loved it because it provided so much ability for me to solve problems by just sitting down, right? I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I don't even have to stand up to solve problems. So I took that back. That's one, right? Second thing that I took back from there was that you're not bad because you fail. You're really not, right? You're just not great at that subject. But you don't need to be the best in every single subject for you to do something useful and meaningful, right? Like, so what if you take another class and didn't do so well already? Like organic chemistry, I will forever hate you. But there are useful concepts from there that I actually took into business today, right? Imagine going from organic chemistry to business. So coming back home, so the last thing about my US education is that because I was such a curious kid, I actually didn't stay in line with the engineering degree, right? I took a lot of courses in computer science, and I almost minored in it. I took a lot of courses in psychology. Actually, I love psychology, from child psychology, criminal psychology, like abnormal psych. I love psychology. And I didn't make too much out of it, right? I just keep scoring really, really well, and I just keep thinking that, I think because I keep scoring so well, let me just keep taking more classes because I need to buff up my grades, right, before my scholarship gets put from under my feet. So I keep taking a lot of psychology classes. I took a lot of statistics and economic classes. Econs really didn't like me very much. But a lot of the concepts that I learned from there was actually very useful. So coming back home, I was equipped with two things, right? I was equipped, number one, with the fact that if you want to do anything, you really can, right? So for my first job, my head of department back then didn't actually hire me, by the way. They hired my school. Because the IT department saw a bunch of resumes sitting in, and then they saw Carnegie Mellon, they're like, oh, CMU, this kid must be really good at programming. And then the head of department asked me in, and I'm like, do you program? Yeah, 101 Python. And like, are you confident? I'm like, yes, right? So they say, yeah, given your school, you can't be that bad, right? So then I got my first job. So technically my school got hired, I actually didn't get hired. I have to like prove my worth to stay in my job. But shortly after that, I got moved to marketing, and then again, right? The way I got moved into marketing was really interesting as well. So from IT strategy, I have a CMO or Chief Marketing Officer that didn't really know the difference between digital and IT, right? So they thought, yeah, digital marketing, IT, same lah, right? You do that, probably can do this. You want to start a department that does that? And like, the confidence from the US education then say, yes, let's do it. So that's how I, became one of the youngest head of department in a thing that didn't exist, right? And from there, I got bored. So I went up to my head of HR, back then, who knew that my bond was ending, right? So she said, hey, your bond ending, you're going to leave the company? I'm like, yes. What can we do to make sure you don't leave? And I'm like, how about I do what I do, but instead of marketing for the entire company? Then he said, that sounds like a big ask, but let me check with the CEO. And then she did. And the CEO said, hey, this kid, whatever, he'll probably figure it out anyway, so yes. So that's how I got offered to be like one of the youngest VP in like one of the biggest conglomerate in Malaysia, right? But the rebellious part of me, right, saying, no, I don't want to earn a lot of money and be the youngest VP in a big company. I want to go out and start my own company. And so I did that, right? I hope it doesn't sound too regretful because it's been a fulfilling journey. So I came out, and that's where the second part of the journey makes sense, right? That the ability to fail and not be ashamed with the failures. So that really, really helped build the company from the very, very early days to where it is today. So I think really the thing that made the difference was the fact that you're not really confined to what you are studying in, like the boundaries is yours to define. And number two, it's okay to fail. Like you really should be able to fail and then accept yourself and then move on from there. So I think those are the really two things that I learned from there.
Wonderful. Dare to fail, right? Indeed. So you study, what is this, Python, was it? Yeah. I think for Tongwei and myself, in our generation, the language of choice was Fortran, right? Yeah, nowadays nobody even knows of what this language was. Now, the last round of questions would be perhaps some advice. I'm very tempted to say some advice for those students who are going to US to study and so on, but looking at the audience members, I think you'll be more like, what are some advice for parents of future students who are going to US to study? I presume most of us here are American alumni. I presume you're going to send our kids to US to study, right? So what are some of your advice for these parents of prospective students of American universities? Well, let's start with you. Yeah.
That's what I say, right? Be careful what you wish for. I'm actually going to send my kid to French education, believe it or not. Just kidding. So, but the idea behind it is this, right? So I don't want to confine my kid, just like how I was being confined as a young kid to say, JPA, go London or Australia, otherwise you're failing life. I really don't want to confine my kid to that. So whether or not he makes it to the States or whether or not he wants to be in the States, it's really up to him. But the first 18 years of his life with me is going to be in the US education, right? The holistic approach to educating and growing and being diverse is what I will impart on him. And it's his choice, whether he wants to go to France, or even stay back, or go to like USApps, right? I would love for my kid to be in Kuching for 4 years and make a more interesting life out of his own than to subscribe to my dream. But I think I don't want to call it advice, man. I mean, look at the crowd here, right? Who am I to give an advice? But here's a perspective from maybe someone a little bit closer to your children. I would really hope that we are open and receptive. I think the world, as we are changing to today, has been so engrossed in I'm right, you're wrong, right? This is the way it should be, this is the way it must be. And suddenly there's a lot of hurt and blame going around, right? Like, hey, you're wrong for supporting A, and you're wrong for supporting B, and you're not right because of, X or Y or Z. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of this blame is coming from people from a more liberal educated background, like the alumni of US education. So if there's one thing that I would really push the cause for, is really whether someone agrees with your opinion or disagrees with your opinion, your children in this case, try to step in their shoes and really understand where they are coming from. And a big chunk of why they think the way they do is really influenced by what's happening around us and what's happening around the world. So if anything, I see the US alumni being a strong force in pushing for moderation and pushing for acceptance of various opinions and various thoughts. So that's one.
Okay, stepping into your children's shoes and be open-minded about their opinions. That's very nice. Don Wei?
I got conned into South Dakota, so I don't know what advice I can give you. Okay. Maybe some personal experience again. I have two daughters. One is going to the UK in 2 months' time. The other one wanted to go to the US. Okay. Both had a program called World Scholars Program. So they've been to US. They've been to visit Yale, visit Harvard and MIT. Okay, so one chose to be going to UK, the other one want to stay in US, want to go to US. So I think my approach was simple. When they were young, I wish as a parent, I wish them to be engineer. Okay, so I start feeding them about mathematics and all things, and guess what? My eldest daughter now hates mathematics. Every time we talk about mathematics, he said, "Daddy lah," because he keep asking me to memorize the times table or whatever. So for now, somehow she went away from mathematics, went into one circle and came back and said, "Want to study product design." Quite similar to my field, and everybody asked me, "Is your influence?" I say, "I dare not say that. Don't even mention that. Otherwise, they run away from that." Okay, so that's what my approach is. I expose them to both countries. And then even Australia, I mean three more common countries. Brought them to tour around, and then brought them to see the uni, and then they decide. And I think my both daughters basically decided based on their character and their personality. My younger one is a lot more rebellious, and she thinks US suits her more. She went to MIT, and the student tour told them that their biggest prank was to hijack the whole LED panel of the uni, and then the other ones told her that there's a lock picking class. So from there she set her mind that she wanted to go to US. Okay. My elder one, of course, had been through UK education, ICGSE and all things all the way, and she is the kind of people who like to pack all the 13 years study into the 4 days exam and decide life on that on the 4 days exam. So then she chose UK. So I think the kids will choose themselves. Okay. If you expose them enough, we should respect their choice.
Well, it's still about respecting your choices and expose them to the let them be exposed to what's available around the world, right? Now, I let Dr. Ong Kian Ming to be the last speaker for this, perhaps the last round of questions, for a very specific reason, because I'm going to ask him, at least to me, a very sensitive but totally non-political question. So you studied in United Kingdom for your bachelor's and master's degree, and then in the United States for your PhD, and now somehow you ended up in Taylor's, heading their so-called PPE program, philosophy, politics, and economics, which is, at least as far as I know, a decidedly British type of thing. So why so? Why not some sort of American program? By the way, I'm also an advisor to the American program, so we are sort of part-time colleagues.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the last question, and also I'll try to tie it in with the question that was posed to Xian as well as Dee. I would say that the US education system is not something I would recommend to everyone. Not all Malaysians should pursue that as their first choice. And this is true experience of speaking to many people. Sometimes it may be better for them to perhaps do their undergraduate here in Malaysia first and then pursue postgraduate options in other countries, including in the US. Sometimes it may be better for you to go to Australia or the UK first because a bit more familiarity in terms of the systems. But for some who are more adventurous, who want to have a more diverse kind of education experience, who want to be in a place where you don't really get to hang out with that many Malaysians, and also wanting to really put yourself out of your own comfort zone. I think the US would be a good place, for kids like that to go to. So, what am I currently doing in terms of trying to play a part in that ecosystem since I'm back in education, like what Dr. Isan said just now? There are some things that I do on a personal basis. For example, speaking to students who are going to the US or who want to go to the US to share my own experience. Recently, I had a pretty good chat with a young student by the name of Victor Ngao, who is one of the 4 Malaysian students who has been accepted to Harvard, and he's a Taylor's student, just finished his A-levels. There was also a chance encounter through LinkedIn with a student who was doing her A-levels at Marlborough College in Johor, and she approached me to ask me about the PPE program that I was starting in Taylor's, that I'm going to start in Taylor's, and she wanted to have some insights in terms of how she could apply for the PPE program in the UK and perhaps some related undergraduate programs in the US. So what I did for her was, I saw some of the areas where she had some gaps in terms of knowledge and exposure, and I asked her to write a few essays that she would use as a basis for her application process to Harvard and to a couple of other schools in the US. And when she came back with the essays, they were pretty high quality. I gave her some examples and some inputs on how to improve her essays for the purpose of application. And yeah, she also managed to successfully get into Harvard among other universities in the US. Ironically, she applied to the UK, including to LSE. She got into some schools, but LSE actually didn't accept her. So it's interesting to see how the different systems react to different application processes. So that's on the personal capacity. On a more sort of like institutional capacity, Taylor's has been hosting the USApps for how many years already, Chen Chao? Since 2009, so 15 years lah. So, this year will be the 16th year. So it's good that Taylor's continues to be that place to host the USApps application process that helps many aspiring students who want to go to the US to network with others and get good tips from others. And because I'm going to take up a new position, I have taken up a new position at Taylor starting on the 1st of June, which is today, as Pro Vice Chancellor of External Engagement. I'll still be doing, I'll still be driving the PPE program. We just got our provisional accreditation from MQA. But one of the things that I want to do, and I reached out to the people doing USApps this year for 2024, is to see how we can actually have more value-added networking activities beyond just the application process. And wearing my new hat, I'll be also hoping to work together with Macy and Curtis to see how we can grow that kind of exposure, grow that kind of ecosystem. And there are also many ways in which we can get more awareness with regards to the different scholarship programs that are being offered by US institutions and also by different foundations in the US. Right, so one example of this is a scholarship that was started by Eric Schmidt under the Schmidt Foundation called Rise Scholars. And they are looking to partner with universities around the region, and I've started the process of engaging them to see whether tailors can be part and parcel of the ecosystem, whereby you will get that kind of funding for students from around the world to perhaps do joint degree kind of exposures with American as well as Malaysian universities. So there's a lot of room to grow that ecosystem. I'm just playing one small part in the context of tailors. And just to perhaps finish up with what Isan said just now, the PPE program had its origins in the UK, right? So, my industry advisory panel, has about now about 17 people. The two most prominent people that you would have heard of both studied PPE in Oxford. Their names are Khairi Jamaluddin and Tony Puan, right? But over time, combination or different kinds of similar programs, whether it is politics and economics, or government or economics, or philosophy, or politics, law, politics, economics, as well as law, perhaps at the master's level. Those are the kind of programs that are being created in the US. So there is room to grow this space. I think there may be even room to innovate and expand the PPE program to a master's level program that can tie in with one of my pet passions, which is public policies, and to see how interactions and engagements, higher value interactions and engagements can be had with certain universities in the US ecosystem. And I think maybe just one final note on this. I think in the past, we have always been looking to the US for solutions, for technology, for innovation. Yes, they are still ahead of us in some ways, but increasingly, I think Asia and Southeast Asia would be, our own areas of creativity and innovation. The private sector, the universities, the government, and this is where we can drive more higher value interactions and engagements, so that we can get Americans and also people who are working in the American ecosystem, doing research in the American ecosystem, to come to Malaysia to perhaps learn from us and to see how we can collaborate and connect to come up with more innovative solutions for society. And that's what Fulbright does as well, and we hope we can do more of that in the Malaysian context.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Tan Sri Kosukun. No, I'm not going to burden you with a speech. The former Chief Minister of Penang and former Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, my former colleague. And also, I think Datuk Lee Yong, right, who was your predecessor in the MITI. He's not here yet. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this evening we enjoyed the sharing of three of our very illustrious alumni as to the experience in the United States, how that experience shaped and guide their career and their life, as well as some advice for parents of hopefully prospective students in American universities. So ladies and gentlemen, please give them another resounding round of applause, and we can then proceed to okay, I will hand it back to our MC. I think that's the safest thing to do. Thank you. Oh yeah.
Sorry for this Q&A.
Okay, do a selfie. Okay. Wow, wonderful. Okay, we have some time for Q&A, right? Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. And of course, I would like to acknowledge Curtis here, who is heading Macy here in Malaysia, Malaysian Americans Council for Educational Exchange. So we can take several questions. Yes, Curtis.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's one of the things about U.S. education as well. We always have questions. So But I think a lot of the points that were shared here today really juxtapose in a very strong way the differences in education. And to Prof. Ong Kian Ming's point, for every 100 Malaysians who want to go to school even overseas, you may only have 5 or 6 that actually want to go to the United States. Now, one of the things that I've learned in being here was there was this tide of sponsored, non-sponsored Malaysians in the 70s and 80s that were all US educated. And, you know, with trajectories is what they are, they're in very high level positions. So, my question as we continue to support the growth of AUAM, what do you suggest the Malaysian alumni continue to do to build that coalition of US alums that can continue to spread the testimony of the educational experience in the United States?
See, so the younger one will start with the more casual response first, just to set the mood. Actually, it's to buy time for them to think about the more educated response, right? So, I think from my perspective, at least, I've met many alums from just like what Ms. Curtis said, right? There's many US alums that are actually currently in very senior ranking positions, whether it's from the private corporate space, governments, or even government agencies. So, but more often than not, we don't hear enough about it, right? So we hear about, you know, KJ and Tony being from Oxford, and, you know, people from LSEs and all these UK educated people who somehow felt the need to hang the diploma that I'm from, you know, LSE. And we see a lot of this in, you know, the consulting firms, the investment firms, and like somehow coming from, like, I knew that my previous CEO, Tan Sri Baki, was from LSE, right? Because they do so many events around Malaysia, and they keep singing songs and praises about, like, oh, LSE alumni, LSE alumni. But Americans alum by default, you know, given the education that we have, don't, for lack of a better word, don't really give about where you graduate from, right? We are by training very, very equal and very, very accepting regardless of where you graduate from. So I've never felt the need, beyond my first interview, to like hang my cert and say, oh, I'm from US, you know, I'm from a very good school, you know, my school very good. I've never had to do that. And maybe we should, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe we should shout out the fact that, hey, you know what, maybe the co-founder of Faith is from Cornell, and someone is from another school, and so many people from UCs are doing so many great things in Malaysia, but they just don't shout out about it. So I guess from my point of view, maybe the first thing we can try is to celebrate the alums around, like just recognizing each other and being a lot more forward in acknowledging that, hey, the US education, my school and my education actually is playing such a big role in where I am today, and to start that movement. So yeah, thanks.
I kind of agree with your point, but also from my personal experience, I have a daughter from international school that's going to UK, and of course among all the classmates, parents talk about it. Where do you want to send your kids? There's a very big group of them still thinks that, especially after pandemic, still thinks that US there's a safety concern. But I was in a state where we don't have the locked door. So US is a huge country. I mean, safety concern could be in only a pocket area. I think maybe Macy can do a lot more awareness on this. That not the whole US are dangerous. I think this is one of the things, at least from my daughter's school, at least more than half the parents had the concern.
Okay, so I will respond by giving 2 suggestions. The first one is more on what we can do on a personal capacity. The second one is more on an institutional capacity. And I think for the personal capacity side, I'm a very practical person, and I'm sure that some among you are of that thinking as well. You would want to amplify the advantages of studying in the US. If let's say you continue to enjoy some sort of a benefit from being around these kinds of networks, right? And the benefits can be quite wide-ranging. It can be social, it can be through connection, so that you can share ideas about business, about how you want to further your own personal goals and whatnot, but in a very transparent and also a very healthy way, right? So if, let's say, there are ways in which these kinds of networks can be amplified, can be used in a way that's transparent to everyone, for the purposes of different people being able to benefit from it in a positive way, and in different sort of like sectors, then I think some of those benefits can also be amplified in ways that was discussed just now. So that's more on the personal part. From an institutional side, given the fact that I think many people who have studied in the US still have connections there, know about the system, are in positions of different kinds of authority within your own organization. Use those positions to see whether there can be more institutional ways of cooperating with relevant entities in Malaysia as well as in the United States, for example. So Macy would be one, but of course their resources are limited. There are other private companies, US companies here, that are organized around AmCham, the American Chambers of Commerce, where they would be, I think, open to discussing different sorts of partnerships that are win-win, for example. Organizing different kinds of public talks, for example, that relate to the US ecosystem. There's the Malaysian American Academic Association that usually would organize some talks whenever there's a US presidential elections coming every 4 years. So that kind of more formal kind of engagement can also be helpful in amplifying the benefits of being in that kind of US ecosystem. So hopefully more knowledge can be put out there so that everyone can see that the US is a big place. South Dakota and many other places, I think, in the US are very, very safe and nice places to hang out in. The big cities are like all big cities, right? KL, there are some parts that are not so safe. When you go to KLCC, it's okay, right? So this kind of exposure, I think, is something that we can all do in our different capacities.
Thank you. I also have some suggestions. I think a lot of us who are American alumni, we have this phobia about reconnecting with our alma mater, and especially with the Alumni Affairs Office, because that typically imply, they want our donations, right? They have their annual picnics and lunches and so on. They would like us to fly back to Chicago, to California and so on, and then to donate. So number one, well, but there's an alternative to that. I happen to have taught at this Singapore University, the Nanyang Technological University, and I saw the way they engage with their alumni in Malaysia and beyond. Yes, there's the please donate portion to it, but it's also about whether they could recruit from among their alumni's children, whether they could, they have all these lifelong learning programs, whether the alumni would take some of these lifelong learning courses online perhaps, and also about networking for these alumni. For example, they are doing the next alumni gathering in Hanoi, Vietnam, for East Asia. And even though I'm not obviously an alumnus of that university, I just happen to have taught there, somehow they try to draft me into helping them with that event and so on. So this sort of, I think perhaps we could start with very carefully re-engaging our Alumni Affairs Office and say, I can donate a bit, but but the main thing is, I think perhaps you could do something else, and I could help you with, at least in my country, doing those something else. Yeah. Any other question? Okay, there's one. Well, thank you for passing the mic around.
Hello everyone, I'm Azlan. I'm an alumni at Boston University. I just have a question for the speaker. Since everyone's been talking about like how great is the U.S. education is, how great the U.S. environment is, how spectacular the weather, the environment, and everything it is. But what makes you choose to come back here instead of staying in the U.S.? Like what makes you, since I don't want to make it sound so bad, but since it's so good, why don't you stay there and get the opportunity? Why you come back here? And of all the people who graduated from this university, that university, do you think it's better for them to come back, or better for them to find the opportunity in the States? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I had to come back because of the Fulbright requirement. And it was always my intention to come back after I graduate. So I had an expectation. And I think the things I've been able to do after I came back with my PhD, shows me that was the right thing to do. No regrets, being in public service and now being in the education ecosystem. For people who ask me, should I come back to Malaysia? I would say it depends on you. Just like how people ask me whether or not they should go overseas to work, I say it depends on you. If let's say, I see that you are perhaps somebody who is very creative, able to engage externally, able to look for new opportunities, perhaps the ability to do even a PhD in your chosen field, then it may be good for you to stay within the US ecosystem if you can find a sponsor, a job. And you would thrive and flourish in that kind of ecosystem. But at the same time, I would also say, and if let's say after working in the US for a while, you want to come back and deploy your knowledge and experience, Malaysia will benefit and you will benefit. But at the same time, I also tell people that, look, the grass is not always greener in the US. I highlighted the good things just now, but I also highlighted some things that were not so good, including the current political environment and things that are related to that ecosystem. We also have our own challenges, but I think what is different about coming back is that we would be able to do things that normally Malaysia would not be able to do in the US. So for example, if you come back, I came back after 3 years I was a member of parliament. Right? So I mean, I'm not saying that everyone can do that, but the chances of you being able to play an active role in public service, in public engagement, using your knowledge and experience in the US will be much higher in a Malaysian context. And like what I said just now, the two regions that are growing very fast for the next decade would be Southeast Asia and also India. And I think this is where a lot of action will take place. So it's a good time for you to be part of the ecosystem if you think you can contribute and benefit from it.
For me, I think I mentioned earlier, I love Malaysia, but of course you've got to ask me why, right? Okay, one factor is family, of course. The other factor, there are three factors I chose to come back. One is family. The other one is, I think Malaysia is a land of opportunity. If I were to stay in US and set up an engineering company, yes, I think we did quite well in UK and Germany, but we can do a lot better here because the competitions at that level is very little. Of course, it's a small country, but we don't have a lot of competition at that level. So, in other words, you've got to be, just have to be a little bit better to stand out in the country like this. So I think it's much easier to find opportunities here. Okay. The third thing is, I think also I want to know what impact I can bring. In Malaysia, I think I can bring more impact. Okay. And I don't just say that for political reason. I mean, to be politically correct. In the last 20 years, I wrote 62 standards for Malaysia, electrical standards. I don't know if I will be able to do it in a country where there's a lot more population, a lot more expertise, and also a lot more. Yet I'm not native. I mean, you can American dream, but I think I got to do a lot more effort and I think here I can do more impact here.
Okay. I hate to always take the unpopular opinion, right? Having to follow these guys again. So I think my response to that is don't come back, stay out, right? Because Malaysians don't need more fresh grad, stay out. Work in Google for a couple of years, work in Microsoft for a couple of years, do some amazing things, go out, right? Because opportunities for you as a fresh grad probably is better overseas, right? So that's my first response. The second response is come back. Once you've established that expertise as an ex-Googler or an ex-Amazon or ex-Microsoft or ex-Adobe, ex-Nvidia, ex-whatever that you've achieved, come back. Like what Mr. T said, right? You're gonna be able to change the country a lot more significantly. I don't know what you're able to do as a fresh grad, but you are able to once you're able to bring yourself with the experience and with the vast exposure. So I see a lot of ex-consultants that do come home to Malaysia because of that purpose to serve. But the third part, which I'm trying to do myself, is then go out, right? Not necessarily go back to the States, but go out. Once you've built your strengths and once you've built your presence, once you've built your credibility in Malaysia, don't be a jago kampong and stay here, right? Take that and then go out again. Go to the region, go to APAC, go to Asia, go back to the States, and then show the world what we as Malaysians can do. Show the world what we as US alums can do. So my advice to people typically is if you have better opportunity, the world is capitalistic, go wherever opportunity brings you. But as a Malaysian, come home. Please come home. After you are, if you got value, if you got no value, then you stay there. Right? Don't come back. We don't need more averages. Come home if you're good. But more importantly, be better and go out again. Like serve the UK and German and prove that we have IPs that is world class too. Right? Prove that we have education system that can be world class too. So that's my take to that question.
Okay. Let's hear the last question and then we get to eat. Yeah.
Good evening, panel. I just want to know whether you encourage the students nowadays who study in US to work on campus and off campus, including internship. During my time, I came from a very poor family. Indirectly, when I was in US, I worked, not me alone, there are a lot of Malaysians, Singaporeans, and some Hong Kongers that work on campus. And I'm there to say I also a bit of truly and work off campus for monthly sake to meet, to get paid for my dormitory, living expenses and my school fees. So to you, as I'm a parent now, I'm not sure whether you all have experience on working on campus. And I have seen that two of my university mates, one is Dr. Khadija, a PhD in CE. She works on campus as a tutor, as a TA, and now I think she is residing in US. Like what Nick Muhammad Aslan said. Another roommate of mine from Cebu, he works on campus and then at the same time he works internship. Before he graduated, he already got a job in San Jose. I think he is now in San Jose, never come back to Malaysia. So as a parent, I also concerned whether any of the students who work on campus may not be coming home.
So this is the washing dishes in Chinese restaurant question.
Correct. You are right. They pay you in cash. Yes, they pay you in cash.
That's a very difficult question. You know it's a difficult question, right? When Kian Ming say, okay, you go first, let me think. To be honest, I don't really have good advice, so I'm not going to take too much of your time. But my take on it is easy, right? One, do what you need to do to survive. That's part of the beauty of the US education. Number two, as a worker myself, right? So I did on-campus, like legal on-campus job. Legal on-campus job. So I was a tutor, which makes like $11 an hour back then. And I was also sitting at reception, which is probably the best job because I get paid $7 an hour to do my homework. I'm like, oh, that's amazing, right? So I did two jobs to afford a more comfortable stay there. Not because Sun Nabi never pay me well, they pay me really well. But nobody say no to money. But so beyond the money and comfort, right, and survival, I think the fact that we are actually working from that stage actually do build a very good discipline and attitude towards how you live your life, right? Like if you're able to put in 20 hours, like 10 hours a week back then, if you're able to do that and then still study and then still go through whatever, by the time you graduate, you're not so afraid of working, right? The whole culture behind like do work, and I don't come from a Chinese education, by the way, so all the rigor that he goes through, I cannot relate because we got no homework, I sit in class, keep plastic bottle, that's literally my education system, right? And I have no regrets at all. But they don't teach you about working culture, right? They teach you how to solve problems. So being able to sit down, do work, earn your living, I think it's not a bad thing at all. So I'm highly encouraging it for sure.
I agree. I mean, the biggest problem with our education system everywhere is they try. I mean, they're supposed to train them to be a good workforce, but they don't teach them how to work. As I say, I'm an advisor in Monash. Every time we will be thinking about whether we need to add in nano engineering or whatever. Always, I told them, why don't you add half a semester about work ethic? Okay? I think it will make them a lot better. But whether we should work or not, I mean, when I interview engineer, I will always value those who has a little bit more. I'm not talking about work experience, but more about life experience. So, but working is part of the way that they can accumulate life experience. I think I value those a lot more. Of course, then there will be a difference between if they work in Chinatown washing dishes versus they work in similar area. I think those who work in similar area may be a little bit more relatable, okay, for me. Yeah, thank you. Anything to add?
Okay, I work on campus. I was like you, a tutor, RA, research assistants, teaching assistants, and so on. And my brother has been teasing me ever since because apparently he works something much harder. Anyway, now ladies and gentlemen, I think all of us are extremely hungry, as well as some of us are also thirsty for stronger drinks. So let's go for dinner. But before that, again, let's give them a resounding round of applause.
Wonderful.